You guys probably remember this meme. It was very popular a while ago. And this is what I mean, that like the story you tell about yourself and about the things that happen to you isn't always one story. So in this case, you've got this idea of being a data analyst, and there's what my friends think I do, what my mom thinks I do, what my boss thinks I do, what my customers think I do, what I think I do, and then what I really do. And part of the reason there are so many different versions of this one simple story is because you're telling it differently to different people, right? We all kind of present ourselves a little bit differently to our mothers than we do to our bosses, than we do, to our friends, etc. So you yourself as a storyteller have the power to shape that data. And it's important to understand that you and your viewpoints and what you're interested in communicating are going to be a powerful part of that conversation. And then related to that, number 3, is that you need to collaborate with your audience, right? We saw in those 6 different versions of the story, part of the reason they were different was not just that you were telling a different story, but you were telling a different story to each audience because of what you wanted to communicate to them or interact with them. Stephen Sondheim says, musicals are plays, but the last collaborator is your audience. So you've got to wait till the last collaborator comes in before you can complete the collaboration. And the same is true for data visualization and data science. This is one of the most important questions you need to ask yourself in any data project is who is the audience? And I'll give you a hint, no matter what your project is, no matter if it's for an internal team or for the general public or for a scientific journal, your audience is not you. Now why, this seems pretty obvious, but a lot of people write or design or engineer for people who are just like them. And the chances of your audience being just like you are slim to none. And so you have to go out, you have to get critique, you have to test. And I'll show you this just with a simple illustration talking about color. Color is one of the most basic building blocks or choices we make when we're communicating. But if there's, I don't know how many people are in this room, 20, 30. If there's just one color, I have a swatch of red here. Go ahead and tell me, yell it out. What do you think that this means? If you just saw some red in a visualization or in a dashboard, what does that mean to you? Stop, bad. Okay, so that's a pretty cultural norm that we have here. In other cultures, you get things like lucky, good, right? It could be a celebration. Red can be, it can mean war, violence, danger. It can also mean love, celebration. Money in some cultures is tied to the color red. So just one color can be highly problematic and highly regional. Now, what if I had a second color? Go ahead. Red and white. What do you got? Blank. What's that? Blank. Okay. Maybe some people see Valentine's Day, some people see Christmas. Some colorblind could be, okay. All right, let's go to red, white, and blue. Yeah. Patriotic, whether it's French, American, could be some people see there's a lot of sailing flags, semaphore flags are in these colors. Okay, what about this one? Italy. Could be Italy. Could be Mexico. Could be Christmas again. And now if I change white to yellow, all kinds of things, right? So and this is just a couple of colors in combination that we haven't even applied them to shapes or to graphs or to anything else. And just these colors in groups together and in proximity together, you get all kinds of different interpretations, associations, connotations. And colors, again, one of the simplest building blocks we have. And yet there are so many different possible associations and interpretations when it comes to applying color. So I just wanted to demonstrate that your audience is going to bring all different kinds of things to the table, and some of them will be obvious, and some of them will not be obvious, and you may get some really interesting results, really interesting interpretations of your work. So you need to put your work out there, beta test, show it to your colleagues, show it to your friends, show it to your grandmother, show it to whoever, but get feedback, take critique, and understand that you can't just hold up a mirror and use that for your testing and your design. Related to that, John Steinbeck makes an important point that if the story is not about the hearer, he will not listen. There needs to be some relevance. There needs to be a connection to the audience. You can't just get up there and talk about yourself without considering how the audience is going to see themselves in that, how they're going to connect to that. Okay, so I've belabored that point a little bit, but think about your audience. Step 4, how to data so people will listen, see all the possible stories. I already kind of talked about how there are multiple possible stories depending on what you decide to bring to the data, depending on what audience you're communicating with. And Jan Martell underscores this and says, the world isn't just the way it is. It is how we understand it. No. And in understanding something, we bring something to it. No. But I want to get a little deeper into this idea of many possible stories because the data is just the data, and it's up to you how to interpret it. We've seen, competing versions of the same story every day in the news. You take something polarizing like Julian Assange, or like pretty much any political football, and there are multiple interpretations of the facts. In terms of data visualization, this is one of my favorite examples. This is on the, your left, is a data visualization of the Affordable Care Act, what we now sometimes call it Obamacare, made by the Joint Economics Committee, led by John Boehner. So kind of basically the Republicans made that one on the left. The one on the right is a visualization of the same exact data made by an independent designer who lives in California named Robert Palmer. So we understand from both visualizations that this is a complicated system, but one interpretation really aims to obfuscate and to emphasize basically all you can get from the one on the left. All you can really understand is that it's complicated, really, really complicated. The one on the right, while it doesn't necessarily shy away from that complexity, definitely serves to try to reveal something in that data rather than just obfuscate. So different interpretations of the same facts. Rebecca Solnit describes this nicely when she says, the stars we are given, the constellations we make. That is to say, stars exist in the cosmos, but constellations are the imaginary lines we draw between them, the readings we give the sky, the stories that we tell. So data works the same way. You have these data points, and there are the stars, but the lines you choose to draw, the stories you choose to tell, are really kind of subjective in a lot of ways, depending on who you are, depending on what you see in the story, and depending on who that audience is. And so the ability to see all the different possible ways to connect the dots is going to make you a much more responsible storyteller, but also a much more skilled storyteller. So how can you do this? Well, you can ask other people for what they see in it. Again, feedback and critique are going to be your friends here, because there are many, many possible ways to draw these lines, and being prepared for all those possible ways, even if you have a particular one you think is correct more than the others, in order to be able to argue for that and to make your case, you need to kind of understand what all the different possible stories are. And when it comes to data visualization, the way that you draw these lines can in some ways be really egregious. I'll go off on a small tangent about 3D and why it's not your friend. If I were to ask you here, which is bigger, the purple or the green? This is from a presentation that Steve Jobs gave in 2008, and Steve Jobs did nothing by accident. So this is, I think some people call this marketing. I call it propaganda. But yeah, basically he's using a trick here. It's in artistic terms, we would call this foreshortening. It's when you create the illusion of 3D in a medium that's really two-dimensional. You have to do this thing called foreshortening, where you make whatever's in back, in this case on the top, visually recede by making it smaller, and you make what's in front visually advance by making it larger. So that's why the green slice of the pie here appears much larger. And then you also get this secondary effect where, because you're trying to create that third dimension, you're actually adding surface area to the bottom to look like it's the edge instead of the top. But visually, your eye interprets additional surface area as additional impact and additional import. And so unless you're actually reading the numbers here, if you're just taking it at a glance, you're going to be misled. But the stars, the data points are all presented here. It's just the way in which the constellation is drawn that's drawn in a misleading way. So I'm telling you this because I want you to understand, not just as people who create data visualizations, but as people who consume them all the time. You have to be very aware of what the multiple possible stories are, the multiple possible ways to draw the constellation, and understand what's happening there. Okay, how to data so people will listen. Opinionated is a good thing, and here's where I'm going to get to Python a little bit. If you're using other languages like R, like JavaScript, each language kind of has this one ring to rule them all situation when it comes to visualization libraries. JavaScript has D3, R has ggplot, and Python has, in this room the right answer is bokeh, but really no, Python has this multi-headed Hydra situation where it's got all these different libraries for visualization that all do kind of slightly different things a little bit better. I think that's a wonderful thing. I didn't always think that's a wonderful thing, but I was convinced by Rob Story, who I don't know if he's here, but I was actually convinced by something he said in his talk at PyData in May in Silicon Valley at Facebook. His talk was called Up and Down the Python Data and Web Visualization Stack, and he made a pretty strong case. He said that, I want to have more visualization libraries. Oh, here, I think I've actually got it. Yeah, we need more visualization libraries, and they should be opinionated. He said, I'm not sure we need another D3 library that can draw line graphs, but the more of his libraries, the better. And the reason is this word opinionated. That's the key, right? Because if you think about it, a toolbox, each tool in there is opinionated in the sense that it does one thing really well and it's designed for one singular purpose. And a toolbox full of opinionated tools is going to beat a Swiss Army knife designed to do everything well any day of the week. So you being opinionated as the storyteller, having a point of view, your audience being opinionated, having certain things that they bring to the table and certain assumptions they make, the data being opinionated and you listening to the best possible interpretation of that data, and your tools being opinionated and being designed to do the job well. When you bring all these things together, you're going to be a very powerful and effective storyteller. And so this is part of the reason I think Python is especially well suited to this kind of pursuit of telling stories visually. Okay, how to data so people will listen. Final point, point 6, immerse yourself to improve. Lisa C. said, read 1,000 books and your words will flow like a river. I've never worked in banking, but I'm told that when you are hired as a bank teller, one of the skills you need to have is the ability to detect counterfeit bills. And I'm told, I don't know if this is true, but I really hope it is because it's so great. I'm told that in order to train you how to detect counterfeit bills, instead of showing you all the possible ways that people could create counterfeit bills, they simply stick you in a room with a lot of money. And I always picture that, who's the McDuck character? Scrooge McDuck, he's got this room, this vault full of money that he literally swims in. I just picture that for every new bank teller hired everywhere. I really hope they do that. But the reason this story is compelling for me is because it's the idea that if you spend enough time around the real stuff, if you learn what money smells like and feels like and looks like, maybe tastes like, I don't know. But if you learn to instantly recognize the real thing, then anything that's not that stands out. There might be millions of ways to create a counterfeit, but if it's not genuine, it'll stand out. Again, I don't know if that's true, but I love that idea because I think you can do the same with good communication, with good stories. I think you can immerse yourself in successful communication, and then anything that's not that will stand out, and you'll slowly begin to understand sort of what's effective and what's not. So I've made this part of my work. When I was at O'Reilly for 7 years and working on their Strata conference, one of the things I instituted there was this data visualization showcase. And I spent months kind of going around finding both well-known designers, but also up-and-coming designers, unknown designers, and trying to find good work, good visualization, and then bring those to the conference so that people could immerse themselves in good work, in successful communications, in interesting visual approaches. and try to put elegant and inspiring work in front of people to help raise that awareness and that data literacy about what's possible and what good communication looks like. And you can do this for yourself too. I kind of have to, I would be yelled at if I didn't tell you that I wrote a couple of books in order to help people do this. So Beautiful Visualization is a collection of basically 20 essays from different designers that I went out and said, tell me how you approach your work and what inspires you and what work you do. And I invited Noah Iliansky to come edit this with me. And then we kind of said after we did that book, there's more here to what's going on. And so we thought we needed to add this second book to the conversation, Designing Data Visualizations, which talks about the linear process of design that we go through, the series of questions that you ask, starting with kind of spatial planning, surface area, and moving on towards shape and color and typography and all those other decisions that you make. And we argue very strongly there that design is not this like airy-fairy creative process all the time, but that it can actually be a linear decision-making process. And so it's written to be very friendly to engineers and programmers who are comforted by that linear thought process. But I'm kind of going to reverse myself in this talk because storytelling, the act of storytelling, is not that linear all the time. We kind of think of stories as having, a story has a beginning, middle, and end. And when we come to do data visualization, there's also a beginning and a middle and end. We start with data, and then we do the visualization, and then we make the presentation, and it's done. And I would argue that while there is a linear process buried inside there, that this idea of iteration and of circling back around, have you ever read the same book multiple times, several years apart, and it just means something completely different to you the second time you read it, or the third time, or the fourth time? Because you're bringing something different to it as an audience member. I would argue that's why it's changing. And so data is just like that. It can mean different things at different times when you come back to it, even if it's the same information, let alone if it's real time and it's been updated, because context matters. Not only your context as the audience, but the context of the world around you. And so I would argue that iteration is just as important as this idea of a linear process. Okay, to sum up. How to data so people will listen. Use the power of visualization. Know yourself as a storyteller and what you bring to the table. Collaborate with your audience and respect what they bring to the table. See all the possible stories, understand the different interpretations, be prepared to argue for the one you believe in, but recognize that your version is not the only version. But know that being opinionated is a good thing, both for yourself, for your audience, and also for your tools. And then finally, immerse yourself to improve. Immerse yourself in good work, seek it out, ask questions, get feedback, all of that. Neil Gaiman says we owe it to each other to tell stories. So this process is not optional. And with that, I want to open it up to some of that collaboration. I would like to take some questions and have some discussion. I'd love to hear what stories you're trying to tell and what's hard about them. So don't be shy. Who's first? It's 9 a.m. Nobody's got questions. Yeah. That's a good question. I was just at the Strata in New York, and they did not have one there, so I don't know if they'll continue that or not. I hope they will. But yeah.
Which feels really dishonest or somehow shady. It feels like marketing. It feels like we just trust Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
But I do want to point something out that myself, not being a data scientist, when I enter in with that opinionated point, it's like that's
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And that is, I mean, it's called having a hypothesis, right? That is the beginning of the scientific method. And so I think that's a totally valid and a great point to make. Yeah. But I think the thing to be careful of there is just to make sure you do have the feedback from smart people in a room somewhere, or that you have the disagreement and pushback. And to understand as you're looking at that data, not to just draw the constellations that you already wanted to see, right? To try to be as objective as you can, and be honest if the story you came in with doesn't hold up. Yeah, good point. Any other comments, questions, war stories? Yeah.
Are there any tools out there that recommend for data journalism?
Yeah, there's a lot. So data journalism is a broad category, and I guess tools to do what would be my first question.
Just to help with the process. Like, so you have a visualization toolkit, then there's no sort of framework for incorporating all that into one.
Incorporating.
Someone like Nate Silver would do that, like 538 log breakout, all its charts.
So I'm sorry, I'm still kind of not fully understanding the question. Incorporating all of that, you mean all the different visualizations into one view, one page, or? Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you can see The Guardian has been working on doing this, the New York Times has been working on doing this, and I'd say those are the two leaders in the field right now, and it's all going to be web-based. I mean, I haven't really seen anything that's not web-based, so JavaScript is your friend in that area, although there are lots of web-based Python tools that you can use. So, yeah, but most people, just to be frank with you, are using D3 for that, and other web tools. There is a D3Py implementation, so check that out if you're really into Python. Yeah, there are some other really good kind of embeddable tools for that, but it's going to be web pretty much. And in terms of how to do that visually, if you're talking about lots of text on the screen as well as visuals, I like the way the New York Times is doing it because it's a lot of white space, which I think is important. But yeah, I would say them and The Guardian are the two people really out there as examples right now. And I don't know what their particular stacks are, but I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah, so interactive data visualization is complicated no matter what, but I would say you want to be looking at, like, bokeh is really powerful. You want to look at D3, you want to look at processing, those kinds of tools. Yep. Other questions? No. Okay. Thank you.